that it slides perfect. Nice. Everything clean. Oiled. So that your action is beautiful.
Ah, the memories. I feel like a young Marine again. Good afternoon, Rebel Rooster modeling viewers. It's good old Terry here. A little clip there for you. Remember cleaning those weapons anytime there wasn't a task being done, it was time to clean weapons. You guys in the Army probably did the same thing. Those of you who were in the Navy and the Chair Force, I don't know what y'all did. I think you went and played golf or something. But anyway, today we're going to do first of a three-part series on cleaning our little weapons here. Airbrushes. It's going to be a three-part series. This first one's going to be basic stuff like in-between color cleaning, basic maintenance that'll keep it running good for you. And then part 2 and 3 are going to be on full teardowns. Part 2 will be for the Iwata folks, and part 3 will be for the Badger folks. And those two are pretty much going to cover the other stuff you'll have out there, like Neos and I don't know about Harder and Steenbeck. I've tried their stuff out, but I've never owned one. So, but the Sparmax is very similar to these two, so you Sparmax users will get something out of those two parts as well. But anyway, let's get started on this and roll right into it. Really quick before we get started on that, if I can ask you to struggle through looking at me just a little longer here. And I want those of you who are new to airbrushing to pay particular attention to this. And that's that 90% of your airbrush woes are caused by one of two things. First one is going to be bad thinning of your paints. You're going to hear a lot of people telling you 1 to 1, 1 to 1, 1 to 1, 1 to 1, 1 part thinner to 1 part paint. And while that does get your model painted faster, you know, quality of finish aside, I think it makes the paint look thick and chalky. But anyway, that's another story. But that doesn't really help you keep your brush clean. And it's a lot like those of you who should understand this perfectly. That's that you keep your weapon clean and take care of your weapon's going to take care of you, right? The same thing with your airbrush. You keep this thing clean, it's going to last a lot longer, it's going to operate smoother, you're going to get better paint finishes. So I would just kind of get that rag and wipe clean that whole 1 to 1 thing out of your head. And what I would suggest you do as a starting point is 1.5 to 1. So 1.5 parts thinner to 1 part paint, or 2 parts thinner to 1 part paint, 2 to 1. When you start getting into detail work, you know, working up small, working close, then you're going to go even thinner, more thinner with lower pressures. That's down the road. But for right now, you know, erase that 1 to 1 thing. It gets the model painted faster, but it really doesn't help you keep the airbrush clean. And that's one of the places where your troubles are going to begin with these things. And the second is what you're doing between your colors. A proper cleaning between color changes, it's really important. A lot of people toss it aside as unimportant, but it really is very important. Again, keeping that brush clean is going to be your friend. So keeping it clean and good thinning ratios are going to eliminate 90% of the problems you have with your airbrush. That other 10%, it's a mixed bag of the oddball stuff like bent needles. Those of you who use the Badger airbrushes, you know this very well because you don't have this little cap on the front of your airbrush and the needle is exposed. So it's easy to bump that thing. Or sometimes when you're putting your airbrush, even if you have an Iwata, and you're putting it back in your airbrush holder and you bump it, you hit the needle sometimes. So bent needles account for some of that. Worn out seals, you know, things like that, that they happen, but they don't happen often, and they sure don't happen quickly, except for bent needles maybe. But that's basically something I want to really drill in your head quickly right now. Proper thinning and keeping the brush clean. So let's do a quick demonstration of color changes and the cleaning in between. Okay, before we start doing the painting shooting, just talk about what we're going to clean the brush with. If you're using water-based paints, like Mission Models or something like that, I tend to use 99% alcohol to clean the airbrush with, and then I follow it up with lacquer thinner. But for the first stage of water-based paints, I'd start out with 90% or 99% IPA. It's good and strong, gets the thing cleaned out. And then I'll follow it up with a lacquer thinner. For everything else, it's you know, Mr. Hobby's lacquers, any lacquer paint, Tamiya acrylic, Tamiya lacquers, Mr. Hobby aqueous, all those other paints. I like to use plain old hardware store lacquer thinner. And whoops, there goes my clumsy self. There's nothing wrong with using proprietary thinners for the cleaner, like say the, well, I'm clumsy today. I think you heard me dropping everything. Mr. Leveling thinner, the AK thinner for AK paint. There's nothing wrong with that except that it's expensive. The hardware store lacquer thinner is good and strong. It will clean out everything, and it's economical. Some people like to use the Tamiya airbrush cleaner. Nothing wrong with that either. It does double as a liquid cement, by the way. But really, hardware store lacquer thinner will be good to use for almost every paint. I just wouldn't use it to start with cleaning water-based paints. So what I'm going to do for the shooting here is I'm going to use red and a bright blue. And the reason for this is because these are two of the most obnoxiously hard to clean colors that there are. And I'm going to show you how proper thinning ratio is going to make it easier to clean the airbrush, and just how quick and easy that is, and what a difference it makes in making your paint easy and keeping your brush lasting longer. So let's get started. I'm going to try not to use the fan too much. I'm using a lapel mic, so it shouldn't be too bad, but those fans are loud, and I'm hoping the lapel mic keeps the volume better. So anyway, apologies in advance if it doesn't do the job. I'm not good at editing yet, so you might have to cover your ears once in a while. We'll see. Okay, so what I've done is I've mixed in the red right around 1.5 to 1 on the paint to thinner ratio. And now I'm going to paint really quick. Cover your ears, this might get loud. Test shot. And now I'm just painting the model, the color. You're probably going to notice that it doesn't cover up really quick, but that's fine. It's always better to go an extra coat where you needed it than to have too much where you didn't want it. But you can see the coverage is acceptable even quickly. I'm just going to help this dry. What I'm using is Tamiya Flat Red XF7 with Mr. Leveling Thinner. Okay, the paint's all gone, and you can see, let me turn my fan off here. You can see inside the cup with the flashlight's aid, there's a little bit of red in there, but basically it's looking pretty clean. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dial the pressure of the compressor up higher to about 30 psi. And the reason I do that is because anything that I might knock loose while cleaning the airbrush is going to get blown out better. So I'm going to take my hardware store lacquer thinner, which I keep in this little bottle because it's easier to work with than it is to try to dip the pipette into the can, then drop it, and then you've lost it forever. And I'm going to turn the fan on so I don't suffocate. Backflow a little bit of backflush, and I'm going to just shoot it and stir this little stirring brush around. You can use a regular paintbrush, but these are cheap. And I'm going to do it again. A little backflush. And I only fill the cup about 1/4 of the way. And keep in mind, this brush is about 10 years old. I've been using this thing for about 10 years. And you can see the brush is good and clean, even with red, which is really hard to clean. So let me off-screen mix the next color, which will be Tamiya X14. It's a gloss sky blue. All right, while I'm mixing this paint up just really quick, another subject that comes up, and it's hotly debated, is mixing your paints. Some swear up and down that you absolutely must mix in an exterior color cup, which is generally what I do. But if I'm only doing a little bit at a time, I'll just go ahead and mix it in the airbrush cup, which generally I kind of advise against. Oh, and by the way, really quick, let me sidestep. After you've shot your regular hardware store lacquer thinner through the brush to clean it, I always take a little bit of the thinner that I'm using on that for that particular paint through here. There's just something about putting my paint in with remnants of hot leftover lacquer thinner, which probably dried up. I don't know if it makes any difference. It's just something I do. But anyway, getting back to it, I will generally mix in my cup for small amounts like this. And the big thing is, you'll see it as I do it. I got a loose seal here. I got to take care of that one day. Anyway, and I'm not counting drops because I've gotten really good at eyeballing this stuff to where I know what it is. And what I'll do is I'll stir it in the cup, and I'll start with a little bit of a backflush, and then I'll stir that. And the reason I backflush is because that paint, when you put that paint in there, it's going to sink right through that thinner and go right to where the needle feeds into the barrel, and you're gonna have like a ton of paint. It's gonna look like you got a good mix and your paint's flowing, but then it's gonna be too thin. So I backflush a little bit, that pushes it back out and mixes it in the cup, and then I stir it to mix it a little more. So that's the big thing if you're gonna mix in your cup. Two things: make sure that you don't put your mixing stick all the way to the bottom of the jar and then start bringing it in there, because then you're gonna bring gobs from the bottom. So stir it up and then loosen all that stuff off the stick and take it off kind of the top of the bottle, and then stir it in there. But let me just run it up the side here. And then what I do, I don't know if you're gonna be able to see this, you probably won't, but I just run the stick up the side. And the paint should run up the side with the color, and after about 2 to 3 seconds, it should be back all the way down without any paint color sticking to the sides. That's how I know I've got it mixed well. So, and I do. So let's go ahead and turn the fan back on, cover your ears. Oops, I still have 30 PSI on there. Let me fix that. There you go. Now let me spray this on. And remember, this isn't a lesson in airbrushing technique. I'm just trying to get the airbrush dirty and do that. And again, you can see it doesn't cover it in one attempt. And if you're doing it right, it won't. Because it's better to have to put several thin coats and have a really nice finish than a big, thick, sloppy one that you did in one. All right, that's good enough for government work. Let's put that aside and spray the rest through. Now, occasionally I will use a Q-tip for the cleaning process. I generally don't like that because it leaves phlegm in there. You know, those little threads that break loose, and then it gets in the inner parts of your brush and grabs paint and sticks to it. So while Q-tips are convenient, I just use these dental brushes, and for the dental work that those dentists have cost me, well, not me, but my girls over the years, they owe me about 10,000 of these things, so I never have trouble getting these cheap. Anyway, turning my pressure back up, my hardware store lacquer thinner is spraying on through there. Once and twice, backflush through. Now, just to show you that I'm not full of crap, at least not about this, let me take a piece of paper towel, and there's no glue on there, it's nice and clean. So, you can see with the flashlight, that is a clean brush. It took, what, 30 seconds to clean that? So it's really important to get a cleaning between color changes, and that's going to really help you keep that brush going a long time. So let's move on to bigger, better things here. All right, now on to the teardown portion. This is going to be the common to all portion of that. What you're going to need. You're going to need a dirty airbrush. Never a problem. You're going to need an airbrush cleaner. A lot of people like to use the Tamiya airbrush cleaner with that pink top that I showed you. It's very handy. I do things a little differently. There are certain parts of the airbrush that I clean with 99% alcohol. There are certain parts of it that I clean with the hardware store lacquer thinner, which is right here, okay? Some people caution against using that because of seals might break down or something. I've used this same airbrush for 10 years. The only thing I've changed on it was the needle and the inside nozzle, which, you know, we'll get into the parts and crap later. But anyway, and I've been cleaning it with hardware lacquer store the whole time. So either I've been extremely lucky or something, I don't know. But anyway, it's another subject. You'll also need Q-tips, because there's certain parts of the airbrush that are best cleaned with Q-tips. A little scrubbing brush like this one here that I use. A paintbrush will do you, but just make sure the bristles are somewhere between stiff and soft. You don't want them too stiff to where they can damage or anything or scratch, but you also don't want them so soft that they aren't strong enough to break things down and break things up. You're also going to need airbrush wrenches. These usually come with your airbrush to take it apart. And extremely handy is an air can for blowing things dry and out as you go. Some people like to have PFTE tape for sealing certain things. I don't know. I always think that a little bit of something's going to get loose and melt the tape, like the lacquer thinner might be pretty tough. I don't know. But I like to use beeswax for things. Not necessary, but I use it not for the needle, but some lube, which I use just for the trigger. I'll show you that when we get to the end. I don't believe it's necessary, but I like it. I just notice it's a little smoother with it. Nice to have are some of these pointed Q-tips with the funny, where's that camera head at? There we are. Hopefully you can see them. Pointed Q-tips are nice to have, not necessary, but nice to have. Another nice to have thing, borderline necessary, but nice to have, is these mini bottle brushes. These are nylon, not metal. Make sure those bristles are not made of metal. And nice to have, but not absolutely necessary, is an airbrush cleaning tool, which you can pay ridiculous amounts for the brand name, or you can get the off name. And I don't know if you can see it very well, but this isn't just a pointed needle. You can see that it's, well, let me stand up so I can see this better, if I can show it to you. Where's my pointing pencil? That will help the camera focus better. Bring this right up to the camera. Hopefully you'll be able to see the shape is different. No, it's not going to work for us. But anyway, maybe down here you could tell that's not just a pointed stick. There's actually a round part that stops here, and then it gets cut in half, and then it's got a flat top to the sharp end and a tapered bottom end. Kind of like a miniature sharp boat hull, I guess, is the best way I could describe that. But this is handy. Not necessary, but quite handy. And those are the things you're going to be using most often. You don't have to have all of the nice to have stuff, but it is nice to have, and it makes things easier. And a couple little warnings / cautions, bewares. I'm sorry if I sound like I'm reading off a cue card, because I am in fact reading off a cue card here. Any tools that have metal, like these bottle brushes, again, these bristles must not be metal, but you can see that this part's made of metal. metal parts can damage, so be careful with the metal portions. Don't force anything. Oh, it's not going in there. Oh, sure. Don't do that. That can damage something. Don't over tighten things. That's another problem where reassembly of the airbrush. I cleaned my airbrush and now it doesn't work. I told you I shouldn't have cleaned it. They might have over tightened something, and when we get through that to that part of the video, I'll show you where those kinds of things are more likely to happen than others. The pipe cleaners are one of the most utterly useless things. I don't even have any with me to show you. I've just tossed them. I hate them because this part of the pointing pencil, this part of the pipe cleaner, come on, get in the camera, there we are. It's basically just a bunch of loose threads wrapped around this thing, but they're always cut to where the end isn't well wrapped. It ends up being shaped like this, so it digs in and scratches everything. The threads they shed like crazy. I mean, like just picture a golden retriever or a Saint Bernard with Velcro grabbing it. That's what happens inside your airbrush. So don't use pipe cleaners. You'll thank me later. When you're scrubbing with your hand, don't go hard with it. And that's why I really like these, because they're tough enough to break things loose, but they're not stiff enough to damage anything. And if I'm pushing too hard, it's going to break off right here where that narrow part is. And it really helps keep me out of trouble. The needle care, be very careful while you're doing this. The needle, when you take this apart and you put the needle down, it's very easy for that needle to start rolling, and it might roll right off the edge of your cleaning area and land on the tip. Don't force it back in when you're putting it together. It'll damage the needle. And again, don't over tighten anything. And when you're putting the needle back together, just in case I forget to show you later, don't jam it back in there. You're going to end up damaging the front end of where the needle comes out, and you're not going to have a good airbrush anymore. So anyway, that's the common excuse me, that's the common part of the teardown that will apply to all airbrushes. So now let's close this one up now, and I'll give you some parting thoughts, and we'll get into parts 2 and 3 as soon as I can get them done. I almost neglected to tell you one last little thing here. And that's the last step cleanup, which is easy to forget. You may or may not see it here, but let me get my pointing pencil. Got a little bit of paint spilled over here on the outside, some red that's got down in the elbow there. So I just don't forget to clean the outside of the brush. And it's probably not necessary, and it's just one of those things that it's habit forming. You know, you take care of things, take care of them completely. Like they say, any job worth doing is worth doing right. So you can see there was a considerable amount of paint on the outside. And then just get a little old piece of paper towel. I don't suggest that you do this barehanded like Ding Dong here is doing, but I just get a lacquer thinner moistened paper towel and I run it through the cup. And there's not much in there, but there's enough to justify the job of doing it. And then you may or may not do this, but I just do this. Take that off, and careful not to bend that needle. Watch that needle. I just run it in here to clean the crown cap. Probably doesn't make any difference. It's just one of these, look how dirty that is. You see, just one of those things that it probably doesn't make any difference, but it makes me feel better. So then I put it back on very carefully. That's basically it. And don't forget the last ingredient, and this is kind of another thing, that's something you don't think about till your lid won't go on, and that's to clean the outside of the cap. I usually don't use this thing, but you can see I've been using this brush all year, and you can see it's getting pretty dirty there. So I'm going to clean the cap. And this, the reason I use this cap is when I do use it mainly is when I'm doing something really thinned out, like a clear coat or something where I tend to thin out a lot, and I move the brush and that stuff is so thin it just slops right over the side and it ends up on my model. So I usually use this for those kinds of things, and it tends to collect color, and then before you know it, you're trying to put your lid on and you can only get this out of it because you didn't clean it. So anyway, that takes care of that. Okay, so the takeaway from this is very simple. Take care of your airbrush is going to take care of you. Thinning ratios, 1:1's a commonly accepted practice, but really it's kind of too thick. 1.5 to 1 to 2 to 1, thinner to paint, are going to be much nicer to you. And the proper cleaning between color changes, which takes all of 30 seconds of your life, is going to just make that brush last a lot longer for you. So anyway, that's it for now. Part 2 and 3 coming up. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.